Farewell, Tom Cruise. Miss you, son, and I wish you well. Farewell, Tom Cruise. Miss you, son, you ain't coming back. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey guys, we've had some fun on this channel talking about various spoofs and goofs, but I assure you, today's topic is no laughing matter. On Cinema is a very funny show. It's brought audiences so much laughter over the years. It's made them think about art and media in new ways.
This is a scrumpdilly, umptious bar.
It's educated them about the filming locations of Hollywood's most beloved movies. But it hasn't all been fun and games. There are layers of darkness underneath all of the Tinseltown cheer, and those following along have witnessed some truly tragic events come to pass. But there's one event that sticks with me because it's so dark, so heartbreaking and cruel. As our collective grief lingers, so too our list of questions grows. What really happened? Who is really to blame? I'll offer my theories, but first we need to lay out the evidence. We need to look back at season 2 of On Cinema, a web show hosted by a man named Tim Heidecker.
It's a show where we talk about different movies coming out this weekend and give you our reviews.
On the show, Tim would review the latest movies, and every single week would be joined in this endeavor by a bright-eyed young film buff by the name of Gregg Turkington.
Hey guys.
However, on March 28th, 2013, Gregg was not present to share his expertise about the film G.I. Joe Retaliation. Instead, Tim brought a surprising guest on the show.
My guest today is Ayaka Owaki. And Ayaka, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
At the time, Tim and his then wife were hosting an exchange student from Japan, and Tim had clearly taken a strong liking to her, enough to bring her on the show as the first ever guest to replace Gregg. Viewers of the show no doubt found this appearance to be unusual given Turkington's consistency as a part of the show each week, but nonetheless, a lighthearted and fun departure before Gregg's return to the show the following week. However, all the while, there was a terrible and potentially sinister situation unfolding behind the scenes. Tim was in the throes of a very serious health condition.
Statuma, as Arnold Schwarzenegger would say. It's several blood clots.
This was a probable death sentence for him, and shockingly, one his wife was seemingly determined to ensure. Her interference in Tim's health care caused the situation to worsen to the point that Tim was resigned to die. And just 2 weeks after cheerfully introducing Ayaka on the program, he was saying his goodbyes.
I hope you guys will remember me, and whenever you go to see a movie, whenever you get a popcorn.
Especially if you go to a movie about a stubborn person that won't get surgery when they need surgery, that would fix the problem.
But of course, Tim Heidecker dying of blood clots is not where this tragic tale ends. Just a few months later, in July of 2013, he returned to his hosting chair with a major announcement about his personal life.
I thought for sure I was gonna be passed away. Surgery happened, much to the chagrin of my wife, and where I'm divorced.
Tim continued to host the show as usual as he recovered from this terrible ordeal and the damage done to his brain. The viewers of the show wouldn't get any real updates on his family or love life until almost 2 months later, when Ayaka returned as a guest the week after Tim had a dramatic argument and falling out with Gregg.
Guys, we will rejigger things here and figure out a new guest for next week, but Gregg Turkington's no longer part of the show.
On this broadcast, Tim made another announcement, filling us in on the events of the past few months since his divorce.
And we're actually officially seeing each other. We're going out.
As some viewers may have already guessed, Tim and Ayaka had a connection. They had quickly become romantically involved, and Tim was in love.
She's very beautiful. I love her. I mean, I love her very much. We can talk about that later. Hopefully she'd understand me.
However, as hot as the fires of their passion burned, their relationship was short-lived. The next week, Gregg returned to the show and accused Ayaka of stealing his VHS tape of the film Airheads.
I recognized it immediately.
Yeah, I love that.
As my copy of Airheads. You could still see part of the coding on this thing, which is all you need to indict and convict. Here's the evidence.
The evidence available to us clearly proves the tape in Ayaka's possession was indeed from Gregg's collection. What isn't as clear is how it ended up in her possession in the first place. The accusations thrown at both Tim and Ayaka regarding this crime were seemingly too much for their budding relationship to bear, and Ayaka returned to Japan, for good, or so it seemed. On March 12th, 2014, almost a year after Tim first brought Ayaka on the show, Gregg introduced a segment called Tim's Mailbag that would change Tim's life forever.
Can you believe it? You're going to be a father.
This pregnancy was a shock to Tim, who made his position on the matter clear. He insisted that Ayaka have an abortion, sent her money, and quickly ceased all contact with her.
That problem has been evacuated. While I stand by my position as a member of the pro-life community, I still stand for those ideals. When you are a part of that situation, choices have to be on the table.
However, in August of that same year, Tim found that simply ignoring the situation would not make it go away, as Ayaka appeared on the show via video chat as a surprise from Gregg, revealing that she did in fact have the baby and that she was coming to America.
You know, Tim and I have a baby now, I named him Tom Cruise.
A precious light in this strange, dark world by the name of Tom Cruise Jr Heidecker. Tim's reaction spoke volumes of his feelings towards his impending fatherhood as he ran off the set in the middle of this segment. If that wasn't enough, Tim made his position crystal clear the following week.
I don't want to have anything to do with that. I told her exactly what to do with that kid 9 months ago, whenever that all thing went down. She didn't do it, that's her choice. I have nothing to do with her. I'm going back to Jackson Hole, and I'm going to see the people that I love out there. I don't love people here. I don't love them.
For some time, it seemed this was the end of it. Ayaka had been unable to reach Tim, and Tim had been able to avoid taking any responsibility for little Tom Cruise. It would be several months before any new developments. On February 3rd, 2015, during the 3rd annual On Cinema Oscar special, Tim revealed a sudden change of heart.
It's a great opportunity for me to express myself to somebody that might be watching right now, Ayaka. There's a number on the screen, it's my cell phone. I want you to call it. Ayaka.
It's still not entirely clear what led to this complete 180. Some say there was a prior development behind the scenes. Some say it was simply a bit of Oscar magic. But Tim made it clear live on air that he wanted to make things right, and made it clear again just a few days later, this time declaring he was ready for fatherhood.
You are the mother of my son, Tom Cruise Heidecker, and I want to be a part of his life, and I want us to spend together the rest of time.
Despite everything, evidently it was not too late, and Ayaka and Tim worked it out and resumed their relationship. This was the happy ending viewers were looking for. Tim had finally made the right decision. Tom Cruise would have a father, Ayaka a co-parent. They seemed happy. They were all living together in Gregg's apartment, finally a family. On the show, Tim would talk about his plans for his son's future.
He's got that thing in his eye that just says, wow, I'm going to be a star. Like how Harrison Ford was the Gerber baby. You could see. Star Wars? Yeah, of course, he was a baby.
Investing in his acting career by purchasing headshots. On April 8th, 2015, Tim made his commitment clear when he proposed to Ayaka live on air.
As Values.com says, if you got something you love, hold on to it as hard as you can. I've messed up in the past, and we've been through some tough times, but I want them all to be good from now on. Would you marry me?
And there it was, a happy family, a husband, a wife, living in an apartment with more VHS tapes to watch than a kid could ever ask for. I truly wish I could say the story ended here. Then began a new season of the show, dubbed Lucky Season 7. Ironically, this season would prove not only to be categorically unlucky, but genuinely tragic. Tom Cruise Jr. would again make an appearance as Tim gave him a small role on the highly rated yet prematurely canceled series Dekkar vs. Dracula.
Maybe one day he'll become an agent like Jack Dekkar.
I hope so.
In this appearance, he would seem in good health, but throughout the season, mentions started popping up of vague medical complications.
Have some issues, of course, up here with Tom Cruise Jr. being a little under the weather, and he's just been having a hard time.
Because Tim and Gregg did not seem gravely concerned, it was easy to write it off as general health problems a child might have. But then something odd happened. Those tuning into On Cinema to see what movies Tim and Gregg might recommend or recommend that they skip were instead greeted by a close-up shot of Turkington, who relayed a troubling message.
There's been a family emergency with little Tom Cruise Heidecker. We wish Tom the best of health. I don't have the details about what's going on. I just found out that they were called to the hospital. We all send him our best wishes.
The very next week, viewers were again faced with the surprise, but this time, the unthinkable had happened.
Hi everyone, my name is Tim Heidecker, and I usually am the host of On Cinema at the Cinema, but today we're not going to be talking about movies. We're going to be talking about my son, Tom Cruise Heidecker, who passed away over the weekend.
So there we have it, the timeline of events that led to the birth and tragic demise of the great Tom Cruise Jr. Heidecker, a child taken far too soon of natural causes from a loving couple of parents that did everything they could to save his life, right? Well, it's not that simple. In fact, Tom Cruise's death was likely entirely preventable.
It's not incurable. It's not an incurable situation.
There's another key player in this heartbreaking story that we've yet to mention. A sinister force for destruction that Tim first met during the time in which Ayaka had moved back to Japan before the pregnancy was revealed.
My name is Tim Heidecker. I'm the host of On Cinema at the Cinema. It's a show here that we're doing now where we talk about movies. I'm here with my acupuncturist, Dr. Sand.
Tim was clearly under this man's alternative medicine spell, doing everything he said, following his strange treatment plans as gospel.
He's putting pins in me like I'm a voodoo doll.
We'll tonify your blood, and we'll smooth your liver chi and get rid of the fire.
Thank you, Dr. Sand. Get me back in best shape of my life. Dr. Sand is with us!
This didn't last long, however. Weeks later, when Tim's face became severely infected by Dr. Sand's dirty acupuncture needles.
I have a stage 3 infection on my face from Dr. Sand's needles.
He publicly disavowed Sand's practices.
Dr. Sand I hate using the word doctor because it's not true.
Even called for his arrest.
If anyone sees him, may he be found and arrested and prosecuted, put in jail for abuse of needles.
Sam would not reappear again until September of 2015, after Ayaka and Tim were married, after Tom Cruise had already fallen ill. He wouldn't reappear during that time, but Dr. San had remained close, even employing Ayaka without Tim's knowledge. When Tim found out about this, he was understandably upset and stormed off the set.
Dr. San is the most wanted man in America. My soon-to-be wife is been working as a secret agent. I've been looking for this asshole for 2 years, and you're telling me he's been right under my nose this whole time?
Dr. Luther is
Get
Dr.
the fuck out of
San.
here! You get out!
I didn't have anything to do with it.
But the following week, all was forgiven. In fact, it was forgiven very publicly, with an episode of the show titled the Dr. San Forgiveness Special.
I overreacted, and we had a falling out. That's one of my biggest regrets.
During this episode, Tim publicly revealed that his son was having health complications.
My son, Tom Cruise Jr., who has his own set of health problems.
But he also announced a troubling and confusing decision. Tom Cruise would no longer be put in the care of hospitals or traditional doctors, but instead in the care of Dr. San, a man who, for over a year and up until just a week prior, Tim had believed was a complete fraud and a dangerous imposter.
I tell you what, I'm going to take Tom Cruise off all that starting today. Medicines, the vaccine, you know, he's got all kinds of medical issues that the doctors are over-prescribing.
Yeah, you know, it's better to just let our bodies, let our own immune system just do their thing.
Yeah, it's amazing what the body can do to cure itself. That's the message you provide.
Of course, this new care plan did not work. As we know, Tom Cruise did not make it. Just listen to Dr. San's explanation of the methods he used in trying to save Tom Cruise's life.
You know, foraging for all the herbs ourselves out in your garden. We tried magnets. I thought for sure that was going to pull the iron in his blood back into alignment. So many needles.
No, we did. I mean, this guy was unbelievable. Just, he had sage, burning sage and everything.
And that just got rid of all the negative spirits, so I really don't know what else we could have done.
Tim putting Tom Cruise in the care of Dr. San was a confounding and ultimately catastrophic decision. But even more confounding was how little Tim seemed to really care about his son's passing.
Yeah. Well, just a bummer.
It seemed that only a small percentage of him was actually sad about it, and a big part of him was potentially happy about this. As he later put on the 4th annual Oscar special,
It's just, you know, it's a bittersweet sort of thing.
If not happy, he was certainly ready to use it. In the time leading up to Tom Cruise's death, Dr. San's reintroduction was not the only major addition in Tim's life.
I'd like to announce the formation of my first ever band called Dekkar. It's a man named Axiom who I met through at Guitar Center. My guest today is a band member of mine from Dekkar is Axiom.
Hey guys.
During his son's illness, he had been pulling away from the situation, spending more and more time with Axiom playing music, which Ayaka had apparently complained about.
Ayaka's like, you're not leaving, so he comes up here with his mobile rig, and we've been sort of doing that final mix.
Clearly, this was a major distraction in his life during his son's last days. An obsession that took him away from his family, away from caring for his child. His son passed away over the weekend, and that coming Thursday, Tim performed a song about it that he had written with Axiom and rehearsed with Dr. San on the flute.
And my future seems so uncertain, 'cause he ain't coming back. 2, 3, 4, time it. Farewell, Tom Cruise. Miss you, son, and I wish you well.
This means that one of his very first reactions, mere days after his son's untimely death, was to write and rehearse a goofy song with the man who had monopolized his attention in his son's last days, and the man whose medical malpractice was responsible for his death. But it gets even more strange, as his reactions going forward are not at all consistent with those of a grieving father.
It's been 6 weeks. What does that song do? No, but it's been a tough couple of months, 6 months or so since we lost the little TCJR, Tom Cruise Jr.
Time and time again, Tim displayed only performative grief.
They have for tonight brought our son back. They've brought Tom back.
Thank you, Father. It's so great to be here with you and Mom again.
This 3D rendered recreation of his dead son is complete with pitched up voiceover that he himself performed about how great he is and how none of this was his fault.
Don't be sad. I've had a great life.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
You have been such an influential role model for me. I love you. You're the best dad. If I could give one message to the world from my grave, it would be, don't vaccinate. It's so dangerous and deadly.
Great. Well, thank you, son. Thanks, Tom Cruise Jr., for coming by.
But the 3D model of Tom Cruise would be wrong. This was Tim's fault, and he didn't care. During that same segment, Tim announced that he received a large sum of money due to his son's death, a suspicious announcement in itself.
Some life insurance on him because of the condition he was in. The silver lining of his passing, which was so brutal and hard for us, was a little bit of cash, a lot of cash, a lot of money.
He announced that he would use it to start an arts fund in his son's name.
The Tom Cruise Memorial Arts Fund.
And that would fund the new season of Dekkar. The appearance of charity, thinly veiling selfish intentions. His use of his son's death would not end there. He would go on to use it as leverage in his opening statements as he stands trial for similar levels of negligence on a larger scale.
I am a father. I'm actually a widower of I had a son who passed away, so I don't know if that's a widow, whatever that is, but he also went at the hand of this Dr. Sanchez.
Ironically related to a deadly product named after his son.
TCH vape system in honor of my dearly departed.
He'd use it again in that same trial to gain sympathy from a grieving mother whose child was also lost as a result of his trust in Dr. San.
That we're in sort of this special club, I guess you could say, which, is what it is.
He would again bring back the 3D model of his son to honor him at his wedding. Tom Cruise Jr., once a human being, blindly trusting in those that gave him life, unable to fend for himself, in that moment is reduced to a flashy representation of the incomprehensible ego of the man that neglected him to death, honoring him at his wedding to a new woman.
I know that you and my new mom, Tony, will live a happy life.
A woman responsible for him getting away with 19 counts of essentially similar deaths. Though Tim tried to pin some of this blame on Gregg.
The black mold that existed in that apartment before we moved in.
The black mold in your apartment was responsible for the death of my son, Tom Cruise Heidecker.
The accusations don't really hold up.
If there was mold that you thought was a problem, you should have cleaned it out because you were in the apartment for several months before he died.
He was always concerned about Tom Cruise's well-being.
I don't usually get choked up about too many movies. Old Yeller or Brian's Song, Ghost. But this just feels as bad as any of that or worse.
And even went so far as to willingly seat a Popcorn Classic segment out of respect when he died.
You have to do Popcorn Classics this week. I'm fine with skipping it.
Besides, no matter how the sickness started, it was treatable, and Tim essentially made the choice not to treat it. You could put the blame on Ayaka, and perhaps some is fair, as she could have intervened. But she was effectively duped by Tim and Dr. San. A lot of blame should go to San. His medical misinformation directly led to this tragedy. However, San is truly, as Gregg would say, a quack.
That awkward moment when a movie review show is ruined by quackery.
San believed in his alternative mumbo-jumbo, and he was doing what he thought he could to save this child.
I did what I was trained to do.
You wouldn't let a mental patient who's never driven a car fix your engine, and if you did, most of the damage would really be your fault. Tim had prior knowledge that San was crazy. In fact, he was obsessed with having him arrested for malpractice.
He's fooled me, he fooled our audience, he's wanted by us.
And yet he put his son in that man's care regardless. Pretty much any way you slice it, the majority of the blame is on Tim. But why? What could lead a man to do this? Was it incompetence? Or was it malice? In constantly mulling this question over throughout the years, as I try to move on with my own life, there's another figure that I just can't get out of my mind. A shadowy presence shrouded in mystery that may have more to do with all of this than it would seem. Very little is known about Tim's first ex-wife. She was kept very private, which in itself is suspicious given what we now know about Tim's insistence on displaying every romance in his life prominently on the show, or his tendency to even bring on random strangers he meets at Best Buy. This tells me that from the very first episode of On Cinema, she hasn't wanted to be involved, and he hasn't wanted to talk much about her, potentially suggesting problems in their relationship. One thing we do know is that she was the sole voice in Tim's ear convincing him to refuse the surgery he needed.
Why don't you just get the surgery on this tumor and then stop with this?
But why? It raises so many questions and leads me to think of her as a faceless, sinister figure, pulling strings behind the scenes. An early and deliberate catalyst in the downward spiral of Tim's life and the lives of those associated with him. Though real evidence is scarce, this is a YouTube video, which means I'm licensed to speculate wildly. By the time On Cinema at the Cinema initially premiered, I believe she had come to truly hate Tim. She hated Tim so much that when his health problems arose, she jumped at this as an opportunity to get rid of him once and for all. She knew the influence she had on him.
My wife, who didn't believe in the surgery, so we weren't getting the surgery.
How she could get under his skin and sway his opinions. Under the guise of a deep distrust in Western medicine, she would manipulate him into refusing this life-saving surgery. But a wrench is thrown into her plan. A young Japanese wrench by the name of Ayaka.
The love of my life, the one that got away, Ayaka. I always love Ayaka, always wish that that worked out.
Many years and multiple wives later, Tim still considers Ayaka the love of his life, which is fitting because she might just have saved it. Whether directly or subconsciously, as it's unclear when exactly their relationship began, Ayaka gave Tim something to live for, a reason to go through with the surgery. When he did, his ex-wife likely could not bear imagining their marriage to continue. She had already checked out, fantasizing about her life after his death, longing for her independence from him. Her choice became clear. If Tim wasn't going to let himself die at her request, she would leave him. Well, this is where we really get into speculation territory, but the way I see it, there's two versions of this, both set into motion by Tim's ex-wife. The first theory takes the incompetence angle, allowing that Tim didn't mean for this to happen, but that there may be a reason for that incompetence. It was because of his ex-wife that Tim waited so long to remove his blood clots.
There was a very small window during which surgery would have been appropriate, and that window is closed.
In that time, his blood clots doubled in size, leading to a more invasive brain surgery, potentially damaging his brain in significant ways. This damage caused Tim to begin behaving incredibly erratically, critically clouding his judgment, amplifying his rage and malice while diminishing his empathy. His mind became scattered, distracted, and impatient, causing him to jump from one thing to the next. He became a monster, a dangerously active and prolific sociopath with no real regard for the lives of those around him, not even his own sons. This spelled doom for anyone unlucky enough to be pulled into his enormous orbit. This theory applies when thought of as the cause to all of the other darkness and chaos in this universe as well. And Ayaka and Tom Cruise are no exception. Unfortunate victims of Tim's instability and lack of empathy.
Tim is a very confused and angry man.
He didn't mean for Tom Cruise to die, but it certainly was a result of his stupidity, his inability to learn from mistakes, and his misplaced trust in Dr. San. After all, that is what it is to be part of Tim's toxic world, a world ultimately created by a wife's attempts to end her husband's life. But let's talk about another, even more disturbing theory, that Tim's actions were indeed malicious. Whether his behavior was affected by brain damage or not, Tom Cruise was not a victim of Tim's stupidity and incompetence as a parent, but rather a victim of a calculated effort on his life, inspired by and directly mirroring Tim's experiences with his wife. With the benefit of hindsight, Tim at some point came to realize what his wife had tried to do to him. It had almost worked. This had become ingrained in him. This set Tim on a path to a very important moment in his life, years down the line. He himself would be faced with the exact same opportunity that his wife had once attempted to seize. Tim did not want a son from the beginning. He made that fact perfectly clear on multiple occasions.
That kid could be the bottom of the ocean for all I care. He's not mine.
Even when he did come around, becoming involved in his son's life at the tail end of it, he never showed a genuine care for Tom Cruise. Even in his initial appeal to Ayaka, asking to be a part of little TCJR's life for the first time, he was almost entirely focused on the fame, money, and power that his baby could achieve. After all, that's all Tim has ever really cared about.
Tom Cruise Heidecker could be almost as famous as the little orphan Annie, or even as successful and powerful as Tom Cruise himself, who my boy is named after, Tom Cruise.
His decision to be a part of his son's life came from him shifting his viewpoint from the baby being a hindrance in his own goals to the baby being a financial opportunity for him. A short-sighted effort to get Ayaka back, in the process convincing himself that he could make Tom Cruise as big a star as his namesake.
I love you, Dad, and I promise to keep acting and modeling in your name.
Living as a family in Gregg's apartment, Tim was faced with the harsh realities of parenthood. Internally panicking, he focused his efforts elsewhere as much as possible, running off to Hawaii a needless amount to film a series that could have been completed in a day.
I'm on camera the whole time, and as soon as we wrap, I got to get back to the airport, and we're here, and there's absolutely barely enough time for me to go to the bathroom, let alone see a
I know, that's what I'm
Will
saying.
Ferrell movie.
Well, I mean,
adding as much to his plate as possible, going so far as to literally pay an Italian musician that he met at Guitar Center to hang out with him. Anything he could do to pull away from his family life that was suffocating him. As Tom Cruise fell ill, Tim found himself faced with the same morbid opportunity his wife had once been seduced by. Tim ran the same scheme, straight out of her playbook, and unfortunately, he actually succeeded. This opportunity came to him in the form of San's return, at the perfect time. A time at which he was deeply resenting his commitments to his wife and son. Tim's family life was interfering with his new escapist dream of being a rock star, and he just couldn't see how Tom Cruise and Ayaka could possibly fit into that picture. We now know from Ayaka's testimony at the trial that Tim was deeply unhappy and constantly angry and frustrated with his son during this time.
He was very upset with Tom Jr. all the time.
We know from the way he used his son's death as a magnet for attention, as an excuse for his greed, that he was readily prepared to leverage the situation to his own personal gain. His flippant attitude and his excitement about the insurance money suggests that a big part of him was glad about his son's death. Like his wife had with him, he would fantasize about it, what it would be like to be free of the shackles of fatherhood and tour the country with Axiom playing terrible music to nobody. Enter Dr. San. Tim's outburst at the revelation that Dr. San had returned was suspicious. How could he not have realized the alternative healer named Dr. Luther that Ayaka was working for was the very same Dr. Luther that Tim was looking for? If her finding her way to working for him was even a coincidence at all. Whether this was real or fabricated for appearances, his decision to forgive him and make a whole special explaining away any suspicion was calculated.
There was a little bit of confusion because she had been calling you Dr. Luther-san, as a Japanese woman would.
Yeah, Luther-san.
Luther-san.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that she was actually saying your full name. And
He wanted to find San, knowing that he was his opportunity. If he really was blindsided by San's return, the universe was sending him a sign, a way out. Tim knew San's methods were dangerous. He had personal experience with it. He knew this man would not be able to save his dying son.
He must have known Dr. San was a bad doctor.
Even still, he put his son in San's care. With a treatment plan that essentially boiled down to neglecting his illness entirely, his ex-wife's proposed treatment plan for him. He manipulated Ayaka the same way his wife had manipulated him, by sowing distrust in Western medicine, convincing her to agree to Dr. San's alternative care plan.
it's the key to health, and you can forget about all that other medicine. You don't have to go to the doctor anymore. You follow the words of Dr. San.
Tim knew full well that taking Tom Cruise to a hospital was the way to save his life. Going to the hospital and trusting real doctors was the very decision that he himself made in order to save his own life. A decision Ayaka would unfortunately never have the chance to make before it was too late. Whether any of this is true, or if Tim really is just a criminally negligent and easily manipulated idiot, I know two things for sure. Tom Cruise Jr. will be missed, and none of this is Gregg's fault at all.